This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good Friday afternoon. Thanks for checking in. Tariff tit for tat is our top story today. China's just announced it's imposing a 34% tariff on all U.S. imports starting next week. It's in response to President Trump's sweeping new tariffs announced this week. The president did it to reset the scales when it comes to global trade, but Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer thinks it'll backfire.
The president made one of the dumbest decisions in history, one that will negatively impact every single American family.
Not so, says Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
What's going to happen now is we're going to build factories and we're going to have great paying jobs. We're going to have 5 million of those jobs, and America is going to retool. You've never seen anything like what you're going to see, the renaissance of American manufacturing.
Still, there's a lot of angst out there over what these tariffs mean for you. Andrew Sorkin with the Squawk Box on CNBC.
There's a grand game of chicken, which is really being played here, which is the administration is saying, bring back jobs. But the CEOs in America are saying, are these tariffs here to stay?
Wall Street stocks suffering their worst day in 5 years yesterday, losing $3 trillion yesterday. Business analyst Kelly O'Grady.
Investors reacted to this as to how they reacted to COVID, because they think some of the same things that happened during the pandemic could be borne out because of these tariffs. JP
Morgan predicts a 60% chance of a global recession if the Trump tariffs are not lifted within a year. The March jobs report went public today, and it was a good one. Far more jobs were created last month than Wall Street anticipated. Employers adding 228,000 workers to their payrolls. The unemployment rate ticked up slightly to 4.2%. Millions bracing for historic flooding from the deep south to the Midwest to the Northeast this weekend. A lot of rain in that forecast, says CBS meteorologist Greg Allen.
There is an excessive rainfall threat, 4 out of 4 on the scale. That includes places like Dallas, Little Rock, Nashville, Louisville, Springfield, Missouri. It's just to the south of St. Louis, but some areas that could wind up with huge amounts of rain also include Chattanooga, Atlanta, and on up towards Indianapolis and Columbus, Ohio.
The National Weather Service using words like generational, life-threatening, and catastrophic to describe the wall of water that's on the way. Reporter Kathy Park continues our coverage from storm-wrecked Selmer, Tennessee.
The dangerous floods overwhelming cars and making roads impassable in Kentucky. In Tennessee, some homes underwater.
Pretty helpless. All we could do was watch all this rushing water.
In Selmer, parts of the town completely unrecognizable, with a tornado leveling homes, flipping cars, and tearing full-grown trees from the ground.
The death toll from the storms is 7 so far. A family of 3 was killed last night after being hit by an Amtrak train on the tracks in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, not far from Philadelphia. Ashley Spencer was on that train.
I heard the loudest screech I've ever heard before in my life, like it was trying to break and it couldn't.
No word on why that family was on the tracks. No one on the train was hurt. Amtrak service between Philadelphia and New York shut down for nearly 5 hours. U.S. District Court Judge James Boasberg is threatening to hold the Trump administration in contempt as the legal battle heats up over the president's deportation flights. Christina Coleman at Fox News.
The Trump administration has stopped deporting dangerous Trinidad Aragua gang members under the Alien Enemies Act for now, but they have not given up the fight. They're asking the Supreme Court for permission to continue the deportations.
Vice President J.D. Vance is confident the Supreme Court will rule in the administration's favor.
We think that we're going to win, and when we do win, that will end this question permanently. Think about this. The Democrats, they're spending so many resources fighting the deportation of gang members. You have to ask, where are their priorities?
Judge Boasberg may issue his ruling as soon as next week. Hundreds of parents in Illinois are protesting legislation in the state house that would force homeschoolers supposed to register with the state. If they don't, they could be arrested and even imprisoned. These homeschooling parents are having none of that.
As leaders and legislators, you must not demonize and criminalize parents who take up the mission to homeschool.
This bill is a pipeline to the criminal justice system for parents.
It is obvious the legislators are more focused on penalizing our parents. Nowhere in this bill are they focusing on how to support our kids.
Parents rallied against the proposed legislation in downtown Chicago yesterday. March Madness is down to the Final Four for the first time since 2008. All of this year's top-seeded teams will be in the national semifinals when Auburn, Duke, Florida, and Houston hit the hardwood Saturday in San Antonio. Auburn and Houston have never won a national title before. Duke is searching for its first title since 2015. Florida aims for its first championship since the year 2007. Still to come on the Noon Report, man drives car into gorge. Vaping epidemic in Chautauqua County, and it's a big day for the new Bills Stadium. Mark Webster tells us why after this.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. The weekend is upon us. It looks to be a wet one. The left forecast today is coming up. We'll see you in 10 minutes.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you then. Today is the deadline for New York prisons to submit a list of inmates who will be eligible for early release in order to ease staffing shortages. DOCS Commissioner Daniel Marticello tells Wham News those in prison for serious offenses are not eligible.
It's really just non-violent felony offenses that are already approved to go out the door within the next 90 days.
Livingston County Sheriff Tom Doherty's worried about the potential impact.
Yeah, I mean, any time that you're releasing inmates, which we know an inmate is someone who's been convicted of a crime, and if they're in the state prison system, it's a serious crime. So anytime you have inmates coming onto our streets that normally would be incarcerated, yeah, it's concerning. It's a safety issue.
The decision comes after the governor fired over 2,000 COs for refusing to return to work during statewide prison strikes over unsafe working conditions.
We all share this national shortage of correction officers. It's not unique to New York.
It makes the county less safe having known criminals that have been convicted released prior to the date they're originally going to be released simply because of a decision made by Albany.
Only those with less than 4 months to go on their sentence and have a place to go upon their release are going to be set free. New York Governor Kathy Hochul's proposed public mask ban has divided Democrats. If the governor gets her way, a new penalty for masked harassment would be added to the criminal code. State Senator James Skoufis sponsored the bill.
The point of the new charge is to underscore that there is an added level of fear that someone could have if someone's in your face screaming obscenities or, God forbid, like physically threatening you while also wearing a mask.
Assemblywoman Nili Rosic says a boosted crackdown would curb anti-Semitism, especially on college campuses.
Jewish students on college campuses feel victimized, and they are being targeted by people, cowards, frankly, under the guise of wearing a mask. We have to put an end to that. We have to stand up against hate.
But some Democrats like Andrew Hevesy are now souring on the idea after the Trump administration announced it supports a mask ban on college campuses.
I'm for a mask ban because I represent a community that has been harassed significantly by masks. But the problem is now you have a president who is actively taking measures to kick protesters out of the United States of America.
Others are worried that such a mask policy would lead to over-policing. Former Pennsylvania U.S. Senate candidate Dr. Mehmet Oz is now in charge of Medicare and Medicaid. The U.S. Senate confirming his nomination yesterday in a party line vote. Dr. Oz now assumes a role that provides health insurance to roughly 160 million Americans. Startling statistics today when it comes to teenage vaping in Chautauqua County, New York. Vaping rates there are 3 times higher than the national average.
It is very alarming. There's nobody that would look to these numbers and see anything acceptable.
That's Steve Kilburn with the Chautauqua County Health Department. He tells WGRZ.
Licensed retailers are on occasion selling these products illegally to residents under the age of 21.
We even have a vape shop that's located right across from a elementary school district.
Melanie Witowski is executive director of Prevention Works, which surveyed vaping habits in Jamestown, Dunkirk, and the Faulkner school districts. She found that 1 in 3 high school seniors in those districts have vaped at least once the past year. Major milestone for a major construction project in Western New York.
Yeah, today is the topping out ceremony at the new Highmark Stadium, as the final piece of structural steel is laid into place at the future home of the Buffalo Bills in Orchard Park, New York. The 60,000-seat stadium, with a still fluctuating price tag somewhere north of $2 billion, is about halfway through the total construction process, and the team says it remains on track to open next summer ahead of the Bills' 2026-27 season. Once it's up and running, the current Highmark Stadium across the street will be torn down to make way for more parking at the new stadium. Mark Webster, Family Life News.
Thank you, Mark. A Western New York man recovering in the hospital after driving his vehicle, for whatever reason, into the Niagara Gorge at Niagara Falls State Park.
According to New York State Park Police, a Niagara Falls man suffered non-life-threatening injuries Wednesday evening after driving his truck into the Niagara Gorge. He drove through a fence near the Whirlpool Bridge and into the gorge. According to police, the driver, a 42-year-old man, was able to extract himself from the vehicle and walk out of the gorge. He was treated at the scene, then transported to Erie County Medical Center. The incident remains under investigation. The New York State Park Police are continuing the investigation with the help of the New York State Police Criminal Investigation Bureau and Niagara County District Attorney's Office. So far, no charges have been announced. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
The executive director of New York Families is discrediting published reports today on his alleged misuse of campaign dollars when he headed up the Conservative Party in Livingston County several years ago. Jason McGuire telling Family Life News that a 3-year politically motivated attorney general investigation amounted to nothing more than lawfare. McGuire's agreed to plead guilty to 2 counts of filing errors to avoid a costly trial that would have bankrupted his organization. He says the attorney general case against him is false and misleading, and there was no theft of campaign dollars, as had been reported. The owner of a Western Pennsylvania shopping mall is being sued for a lack of upkeep.
The Pittsburgh Mills Mall, northeast of Pittsburgh, has become a public nuisance, according to criminal charges filed by the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office. At the root of the case is what officials call the treacherous condition of roads around the mall complex. Last week, New York-based Namdar Realty Group, which owns the mills, spent $21,000 to fill potholes around the complex, but the repairs are only temporary. Namdar has been charged with 1 misdemeanor count of creating a public nuisance. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Disease-carrying ticks are one of the most unpleasant realities of the coming spring season. Insect expert Dr. John Wallace is a retired entomologist at Millersville University. He blames milder winters for the tick infestation.
Winter temperatures used to be so cold that these pests would die off and they wouldn't be such a problem. So we see that they're not dying off. We also see that as their ranges expand northward, they bring with them pathogens that can cause us problems.
Chief, among those problems is the growing prevalence of Lyme disease in Pennsylvania. In fact, the Keystone State has the highest number of Lyme disease cases of any state in the country. Sports news next. It's the 2-minute drill on Family Life.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, it was an abbreviated schedule in Major League Baseball last night with just 5 games played, but they did play one of them in the Bronx, and Aaron Judge continued to be loud. He went 3 for 5, hit a 3-run home run, and drove in 4. The Yanks pretty much needed all of them, too, as they salvaged their series finale with Arizona, winning 9-7. In Philadelphia, the The brooms were out and they were used as the Phillies swept their series with the Rockies. Taijuan Walker tossed 6 scoreless innings to pick up the victory, 3-1 the final. The Brewers shut out the Reds 1-0. Houston a 5-2 winner over the Twins. However, in that game, Jose Altuve did something he had never done before in his entire career, and he hopes he'll never do it again. He struck out 5 times, but his team won, so it softened the blow. Or maybe I should say the lack of blows. Boston beat Baltimore 8-4. On to the NBA. The 76ers can't wait for this season to be over. They lost again, this time to the Milwaukee Bucks, 126-113. The Nets fell to the T-Wolves, 105-90. Steph Curry lit up the Lakers for 37 points, and Golden State won 123-116. That is a look at sports.
All right, Randy, thank you for that. Still to come on the Noon Report, Microsoft turns 50. The Capital Connection crew. And umbrellas up this weekend. Kev's got that wet forecast for you in 3 minutes.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. On this day, April the 4th, in 1945, the last in a famous series of talks by C.S. Lewis was broadcast across the BBC. These talks would become the substance of Mere Christianity, a book that's often listed as the most influential Christian book of the 20th century. Lewis was a layman who was trained in philosophy, logic, and literature, not in theology. So how did he manage to produce such a profound and important work on the Christian faith? While many are familiar with the story of Lewis's conversion from atheism to Christianity, fewer know anything about his spiritual growth after conversion. An early critical element of this formation came in 1935, just 4 years after his conversion, when Lewis was assigned to write the volume on 16th century literature for the Oxford History of English Literature. So Lewis read everything published in English in the 16th century. That included every work of Thomas More and all the translations of people like Martin Luther, John Calvin, and the other Catholic and Protestant thinkers of the Reformation. From this unmatched education in historical theology, Lewis came to realize that many of the accusations leveled by each side of the Reformation weren't wholly true, but often caricatures of the other's positions. This encouraged him to focus in his BBC addresses on those points to which all Christians agreed. And the label Mere Christianity was borrowed from 17th century Puritan Richard Baxter. Another important element in Lewis's spiritual growth came in 1940, when Lewis decided he needed a quote-unquote spiritual director. In the nearby village of Cowley was an Anglican priest named Father Walter Adams of the Society of St. John the Evangelist. Lewis met with Father Adams every week for confession and spiritual direction for the next 12 years. Now, little is known about their meetings, but we do know that Adams was a high church Anglican who directed Lewis towards traditional devotional disciplines. So Lewis began to pray through the Psalter each month. He developed a deep appreciation for the Lord's Supper. Father Adams pointed Lewis to Richard Benson, the founder of the Society of St. John the Evangelist, and Benson's theology influenced Lewis in profound ways, especially the ideas that can be found in Book 4 of Mere Christianity. Father Adams' spiritual direction had a profound and dramatic effect on Lewis. For example, Lewis attributed the overcoming of a number of personal sins to prayer and fasting, and according to friends who knew nothing about his meetings with Adams, Lewis's character began to change in profound ways in the early 1940s. The breadth and the depth of Lewis's theological readings made him, as a self-taught theologian, one of the great Christian thinkers of the 20th century. And his practice of spiritual disciplines, worship, and spiritual accountability shaped his heart. And with head and heart in line, God granted Lewis an extraordinary ministry. In this way, Lewis is a model of discipleship, the kind of discipleship that can provide a foundation by which we can both serve others and live a life pleasing to God. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Outside next, Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast for this afternoon. Partly sunny in a good part of western and central New York. Clouds will be more stubborn in Pennsylvania. High temperatures ranging in the 50s and low 60s. Mainly cloudy tonight. Some rain comes in overnight in western New York and western Pennsylvania. Could be some thunder. Low temps 40s. Tomorrow, cloudy, breezy, periods of rain. High temps mid-50s to mid-60s. Chillier Sunday, morning rain. Even a few wet flakes in the high ground of the western Twin Volunteers, tapering. The high temperatures on Sunday, mostly in the 40s.
All right, thank you, Kevin. It's Friday, folks, the 4th of April, and this is the Noon Report. Welcome back to another edition of Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you direct connection to all that's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues at the state capitals. They are this week Dan Bartkowiak at the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire at New York Families. Well, Jason, here we go again. It's been several years since New York State has had an on-time budget. I know they moved the budget deadline this year, kind of moving the goalpost there, but still, it's late. It's supposed to be in April 1st. It's not. We used to complain about the lack of transparency when it comes to the budget adoption process, or the sausage making, as you like to say. Has anything changed in that regard?
Well, I think what's changed really began with Governor Andrew Cuomo, is that policy has been packed into the budget. I used to tell people that Albany was different from Washington, D.C. in one sense, that they didn't load up their fiscal plans with all sorts of policy issues. Well, that's changed. And really what's holding up the budget right now is Governor Kathy Hochul is inserting a ton of policy into the fiscal plan, and the legislature is rejecting that. So that's the battle that's unfolding, is how much policy can we cram into the annual budget?
Do you think this is going to be a protracted battle, or will they sort this out relatively quickly?
It always seems to be there's no action until there's very rapid action. I expect that sometime next week the budget will pass. If not, we're probably looking around the end of April for the state budget.
Gotcha. Well, Dan, Pittsburgh Democrat Lindsey Williams, she's a liberal state senator from Western PA, making headlines recently while decrying the Save Women's Sports Act, which passed out of committee recently. It would basically ban biological boys and girls sports. Senator Williams said, and I want to quote her directly and get your reaction, quote, "Female bodies are just as strong, fast, and capable as male bodies." Capable, yes. The other two, fast and strong. She might have a few naysayers there. Your thoughts on what the senator said on this contentious issue?
Yeah, I was in the audience for the committee vote, and in her prepared remarks, starting off with that, just made me completely shocked. And I think the average person understands that too. Her comments there have already garnered almost 1 million views, because the average person understands it's just absurd and fantasy land to say that girls are fast and strong in these athletic competitions. You know, Lindsey Williams was saying after the vote, kind of laughing about it, saying, well, they didn't stop Michael Phelps from, competing because he had a physical advantage. And it's just this fantasy land that we think boys and girls are on the same level. Why do we have different sports for boys and girls? Yeah. By her rationale, we should just have all one sport. And so it's, again, underscores why we need to save women's sports and need a bill like that here in Pennsylvania.
Jason, over 150 pro-life groups have signed a letter urging Congress to defund Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider. But it's not the behemoth that it used to be. In fact, one of the largest Planned Parenthoods in the country has just shut down in Manhattan. Why is Planned Parenthood experiencing such financial difficulty when it receives so much money from the government?
Well, essentially, Planned Parenthood takes the dollars they receive and they direct so many of those dollars to political activity rather than patient care. And that's a problem for Planned Parenthood, because they are increasingly, we're seeing medical issues occurring at their facilities. There was one facility, for example, where sewage was running under the doors, and there were some issues there with patient care, obviously, and what's proper care. But with an emphasis on political activity, and with the country swinging a different direction now on the politics of Planned Parenthood, it is having an impact on that entity.
Yeah. They're trying to reinvent themselves, Jason, but not in a good way. Explain what's going on with Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood has always been known as the abortion behemoth, and they continue to provide abortions all across the country. But they are now moving further and further into the transgender front, and they are offering hormonal treatments and other things as a way to bring in some revenue and to shore up their bottom line. Remember, Planned Parenthood is always about the profit, not the patient care.
Yeah. Dan, you've been warning for months, your organization, about Planned Parenthood's efforts to infiltrate school board elections this year in Pennsylvania. What's their strategy, and how can Pennsylvania voters interfere with that strategy?
Yeah, and I'd echo what Jason said. The profit margins are really what their priority is versus actually patient care. And they've specifically stated in Pennsylvania they want to shut down every pregnancy resource center in the state. They want to sandblast every type of limit when it comes to abortion, whether it's regulations on abortion facilities in terms of inspections, to doing abortions at any stage that are funded by taxpayers. And so it's, again, with school boards, they view this as they want to get more customers, frankly. They want to staff offices in high schools where their abortion facility is just down the road. So they've really shown their cards. They're really kind of brazen about this, and it needs more people understanding at that local level. If we give them more control, the impact on our children is going to be devastating.
And you have information on your website. We'll give that at the end. Jason, it is hard to know exactly how many illegal immigrants are in New York, but the number is in the hundreds of thousands. Governor Hochul doubling down on her refusal to cooperate with federal immigration officials. This came up recently in Rochester, where instead of praising local police for capturing and arresting illegal immigrants, those cops actually got reprimanded by the city's mayor. Rochester, of course, is a sanctuary city. What's going on in New York, and how might, in the long term, this end up hurting New York when it comes to federal dollars, which are so important to the state?
Well, that sanctuary state status that we have is certainly having an impact on municipalities across the state. We're seeing it certainly in Rochester, where there is an effort to protect those that are here illegally over officers. It potentially has some major issues because it's drawing the attention of President Trump. And as Tom Homan, the border czar, has already said he's coming to Rochester to support those officers, it could mean the loss of some direct funding for places like Rochester and other places throughout the state if they will not get in line with what the president is desiring regarding immigration.
Well, Dan, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which I don't know where their slant is, I can't imagine they're very conservative, but they issued an editorial this week saying that marijuana legalization is not the answer to Pennsylvania's long-term budget woes. I've seen stats showing that it costs society $5 for every $1 that is generated in marijuana sales. When are states going to start to realize that pot simply does not pay off in the long run?
Well, I think states will realize when they just look at the facts and evidence and learn from these other states. That's why I appreciate the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette editorial board, where they looked at what's going on in these other states, the potency level that has risen, particularly in the last decade, where you have edibles concentrates that can be 90% THC. There's a variety of harms that we're seeing in states that increase access and frankly can profit off of the more addictive use of this drug. Majority of the users are using it on a daily basis, more frequent basis, and the cannabis-induced psychosis and cannabis use disorder, the addiction efforts, we're seeing more and more of those problems. So when you look at the evidence from these other states, it points to saying this should not be a budget battle. This should be something that we oppose and put priority of people's health and well-being over any type of promises of revenue. So again, I appreciate the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette looking at those facts and evidence, and I think if we do that, we should be running away from any type of commercialization here in Pennsylvania.
And Jason, for years, have been saying, see, I told you so, because you've been warning against this for years, Jason, but it just seems nobody is listening. These pot shops now number in the hundreds in New York. In fact, this week marked 4 years since the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act took effect. That was, I believe, March 31st in the year 2021. Here we are 4 years later, Jason. What's been the net effect of marijuana incorporated in the Empire State?
Well, one of the interesting things that New York did was it gave preferential treatment to former drug dealers in opening these dispensaries. And so we're seeing the rise and the spread of cannabis use, and we're seeing marijuana in young people. We're seeing it available so freely and almost tacitly endorsed in the state that now it's very, very common. And, I am concerned as to where this leads, because the studies are coming out, as has been indicated, marijuana addiction and what that means for young people. And those young people grow up and they grow into harder addictions. And so we have a real concern over what is happening in our state and around the country.
Yeah. We don't talk a lot about the issue of capital punishment, but it did come up this week, Dan. A conservative Republican, of all people, Russ Diamond, wants to abolish capital punishment once and for all. It's been over over 25 years since the death penalty has been used in Pennsylvania. I imagine, well-meaning Christians can agree to disagree when it comes to an issue like this. But the rationale that a lot of pro-lifers argue is that to really be pro-life, it's a contradiction to support the death penalty. Wonder if you have any thoughts on that, Dan?
Yeah, it's a good question. And proposing even from a pro-life perspective, I think it's important to say, yes, like the last 25 years, there hasn't been anybody put to death through capital punishment here in Pennsylvania. Yet every day we have about 100 abortions that occur in our state. And every year there's hundreds that are after 5 months in pregnancy. I mean, those things are very real. I will say that Representative Russ Diamond, I have respect because he's stated in many interviews on this that he's a Christian, that he points to the cross, and that everyone can have redemption. I respect a legislator that is bringing up his faith. That yes, we can have redemption at the cross of what Christ has done for us. And speaking publicly about that, we really need to see more of that.
Yeah, that's a great thing to say. And great show this week, guys. The fastest 10 minutes in radio. Our time is up, but there's so many issues discussed today. If you have questions about the New York State budget and what's going on there, Jason McGuire, you have a wonderful website where folks can check you out, learn more about what New York Families is. What is that, if you would, sir?
NewYorkFamilies.org.
And read all about it, the Save Women's Sports Act, and the comment made by a Pittsburgh Democrat. You're not going to believe what she said, but you have all that information as well on your website, Dan. Where can folks find you?
PAFamily.org.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Capital Connection comes your way Fridays during the Noon Report.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. Well, the weekend is here, and it does not look great weather-wise, to be perfectly honest. An area of low pressure will bring us rain Saturday night, Sunday morning. And although it'll be mild on Saturday, much chillier air comes in on Sunday. It's set the stage for some wintry weather for some early next week. In the meantime, for this afternoon, it'll be partly sunny, and a good part of western and central New York. Clouds will be more stubborn in Pennsylvania. High temperatures ranging in the 50s and low 60s. Mainly cloudy tonight. Some rain comes in overnight in western New York and western Pennsylvania. Could be some thunder. Low temps 40s. Tomorrow, cloudy, breezy, periods of rain. High temps mid-50s to mid-60s. Chillier Sunday, morning rain, even a few wet flakes in the high ground of the western Twin Tiers. Tapering. High temperatures on Sunday, mostly in the 40s.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Finally, noon, a wildly successful big tech company is celebrating its 50th anniversary today.
High school buddies Bill Gates and Paul Allen called their company Microsoft, short for Microcomputer Software. They went on to develop the MS-DOS operating system for IBM PC-compatible personal computers. Then came Windows, a game changer that turned Gates into one of the richest people in the world. Their goal from the beginning was to put a computer on every desk and in every home. They did that and much more.
That's Christopher Cruz reporting. And that's our world. The world we live in, Friday, April 4th. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.